Hi, this is Dr. Mancini, and thank you once again for joining us for the FCA Empower Half Hour webinar. As you know, the FCA is very interested in making sure that you stay motivated, that you stay passionate about what we do every single day as chiropractors. And we do have a lot of distractions in healthcare. We do have a public that is very confused about what to do and what not to do. Maybe people that may not appreciate necessarily what we do as chiropractors and the paradigm that we're trying to promote to the world. But these webinars are really here to help you get excited, to get energized, and also to meet some of the most amazing speakers that the FCA brings to you, to the physical programs that are called the regionals, and of course the national, which is every August, which if you haven't signed up, you better sign up because it's now the biggest program in the country as far as chiropractic, but also full of incredible topics and amazing speakers from all over chiropractic and outside of chiropractic. Well, today I'm very excited because I get to introduce to you one of my favorite people in the world. In fact, one of the people that inspired me early on in my career to recognize that traditional medicine was not the answer to every one of the health problems that we were facing. And when I started listening to him and reading his columns and getting to know him as a person, I really understood that the science today really is supporting the paradigm that we're promoting and not the opposite. The problem is that we're stuck in a healthcare system that is having a really hard time changing. But anyways, let's give a big welcome to Dr. Joe Mercola. Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to connect with you again, Fab.
Well, it's so great to see you. Always excited, always looking so healthy. But I've been looking forward to this webinar because I know that you have been in this path for a while. And there may be some people that have heard your name and I'm sure have been to your website, which is, as you know, the #1 website in the natural healing professions. But I want you to know something. When I met you the first time, you were very different than what I had anticipated you being, because you were, not just cerebral, meaning that you have all this knowledge that we always see your videos and read your articles, but you're a very warm and kind person. And I was really happy to see how much you love and support chiropractic and chiropractors. I mean, some of your best friends are chiropractors. But tell me a little bit about your journey, Joe, because there may be some people that maybe not as aware of you as I am. But tell me a little bit about what got you started in this path towards health and well-being.
Well, I've always been interested in health ever since I can remember. And my first journey started with exercise, but then I gradually understood the importance of nutrition. And, the foods that you eat really control the vast majority of your health. So I've been focusing on that for the last 3 or 4 decades. I went to med school graduated 35 years ago and, saw tens of thousands of patients before I was able to combine my passion of technology and health into a digestible form of information that's now spread around the world. And we have got 10 million unique visitors every month and 80 million unique visitors a year to spread the message of health and wellness.
Well, what was it? Did you have an experience, perhaps personally, or somebody close to you that made you very passionate about the natural and holistic perspective? Because, your formal training was as a medical doctor. You have one of the biggest practices in Chicago for many years. But what was it that really led you into that? Was it your own personal journey that you were dealing with or that you were interested in? Or was it something like a defining moment in your life?
Well, I didn't have any epiphanies. I certainly didn't have any personal health challenges. But I read a book in 1968 by Dr. Cooper called Aerobics, and he's really the person who catalyzed. If he's not too far, I think you live in the Dallas area. Certainly Parker was in Dallas and you're living there, so you're quite familiar with Dr. Cooper. So he was an early mentor of mine, and that's what catalyzed my interest in exercise and health, thinking that not really, and then I bought into the nonsense, of course, just being a regular consumer student at that time and not understanding the importance of, or the myths and the deception and the fraud that was being forced on us by the media and the low-fat diet nonsense. So it took me a few decades to figure that one out, and I suffered a lot of damage as a result of not understanding that flaw in rational thinking.
And what was it that was happening? Let's say that you graduated, you opened your practice, And were you, since the beginning, very holistic in your approach, or is that something that evolved through time? And what were you noticing in the results you were getting with your patients?
Well, I was always interested in health, but I was pretty much brainwashed when I went to med school and had most of my patients on medications. And I had read a book by Dr. William Crook, who has been since passed away. He wrote the book, The Yeast Connection, and many other books. But that intrigued me as a concept, and clinically, I initially applied it when I first started my practice, and it failed because I was in the drug model. But then I got a little smarter a few years later, and I applied it again for some other patients, and it worked dramatically. It changed their lives, and that started me on a path to recognize that there were other physicians who had this passion also, and then I started learning through those organizations and their regular meetings, and started traveling around the country like most of us have done and continue to do to improve and increase our education.
Now, Joe, you said that you had a passion for technology, and I know that there was an evolution in your case that got you from private practice primarily to inform the world about many of the things that you were seeing by reading, especially the latest evidence and research out there, and really looking deeper than most people that I've seen have ever looked regarding really where health comes from and what were the key things that were making us sick as a society. So tell me a little bit about how that evolved for you. I mean, how did you start it going from private practice into creating an online component that began to educate not only the public, but many, as you know, many chiropractors and medical doctors and osteopaths and naturopaths that follow you all over the world, and you continue to guide them and guide us as to what are the latest evidence and what is it saying and really where health is really coming from today.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a personal mentor, there was a physician, Ron Rosedale, who I attended a lecture in '95, which is a few years after I started my journey into health at a deep level. And he helped me understand the importance of insulin, and that just radically improved. It sounds pretty obvious now, but back in the mid-'90s, that was not commonly understood. And even sadly today, by most physicians, because they've got large numbers of type 2 diabetics, non-insulin dependent diabetics, on insulin, which is just the worst thing you could possibly give them. So understanding that was a big part of the equation. And then actually maybe 15 years later, he helped me understand the importance of limiting protein because of its influence on a really important biochemical ancient pathway called mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin, that may be actually more important to having the right limited amount of protein than limiting carbohydrates because of the molecular pathology it causes. So when these types of interventions are applied, I mean, you just see miracles. It's just amazing. It's just shocking. And you know, my passion now is to consolidate, because it's not an easy process to explain to people, and it's certainly not going to do it in 30 minutes here, and I'll probably only partially be able to do it in the time I have at the event. But I look at it like a puzzle. It's like a 10,000 piece puzzle. And one of my talents is to sort of sort through that and digest it and present it in a way that's easy to understand and apply. And we've got a great tool too. It's called Chronometer, CRONOMETER.com/Mercola. That's free to use, no charge, and it's a nutritional tracker that allows you to enter all your data. Very accurate. It's the most accurate one on the market. There's no crowdsourced data, and it really allows you to carefully monitor what you're eating, so you can track that and understand how that changes some of the clinical challenges that you're having, and simple blood tests like blood sugars and cholesterol and those types of parameters.
So let me ask you this question. I mean, you've been very passionate about chiropractic since I've known you. Mm-hmm. We both have many friends in chiropractic that are common friends of both of us. So tell me a little bit about, you know, what was it about chiropractic? You know, you were trained traditional. So what was it that you saw as a value of chiropractic to society? And why is it that you have been so supported all these years to this amazing profession of ours?
Well, primarily because they're the largest healthcare profession that really have a solid understanding of what lifestyle impact has on health. I mean, they're not embracing medications. And I mean, there are other professions like naturopaths who are doing similar work, but from a numbers perspective, they're a small minority compared to chiropractic physicians. They have, in my view, the largest potential to make an impact on the health of the country, because there's so many, they're in the trenches. They're seeing people day to day, and they can interact with them and share solid information that will lead them towards abandoning the traditional model, the conventional model that relies so heavily on medications and surgery.
Do you have any personal stories for yourself or a family member or a friend that you've seen?
Well, sure.
Chiropractic has
actually,
the difference?
A mutual friend of ours, Patrick Gentempo, who's one of my best friends, is shared with me a solution from my girlfriend, Erin Elizabeth, for the last 7 years. And she's had a frozen shoulder and actually a torn labrum. And little to my, or actually, maybe not to my surprise, but I was impressed with the fact that there are specific types of adjustments, specifically a form of an occipital adjustment, which just clears up frozen shoulder, not even touching the shoulder. So she's actually going to have this adjustment done next week because the chiropractor who we see locally is out of town. So I'm excited to see that intervention. I'll certainly be able to share it at my presentation. So,
well, Joe, let me ask you this. I mean, you probably have the ear of the public more than any healthcare provider in the world. What are you seeing that the public is struggling with right now? As they message you and they talk to you and they ask you questions, and I mean, you have such a wonderful way to communicate through Mercola.com with so many millions of people. So what are you feeling that society is experiencing right now? Where are the challenges that we as chiropractors need to be aware of? Because these are our patients that may never tell us, but this is also our communities that we need to really support, maybe beyond just the chiropractic adjustment.
Sure. Well, there's two primary ones that have emerged within the last year or two, and the evolving one, of course, is the freedom of vaccine rights and the ability to refuse those. We lost a big battle in California last year, or was it earlier this year?
No, last year.
I think it was last year. Yeah. So that was a big one, and that is a hot button for many of us, to have the opportunity, the ability to actually make that choice yourself and not have it essentially forced on by the government. So it's a big freedom issue.
And how would you explain that, Joe, to, let's say, a chiropractor that may not be as well versed as to why vaccinations? Because you've studied the subject matter. I've seen you lecture the subject matter. We all raised a lot of to fight the thing in California and many others. But in your opinion, what would you tell somebody like me, a chiropractor that maybe was not trained as well as to the side effects of vaccinations, or perhaps the dangers of vaccinations? And I know there's a new documentary out there, and Andrew and I were doing a radio show recently called Coast to Coast, and I did the first 2 hours. He did the second 2 hours. And he was talking about all of this, but what would you say from the feedback that you get from all your people, and also from your own knowledge, why we as chiropractors need to pay attention to this one important subject?
Well, I think the big issue is to be aware that there are ulterior motivations to promote the message that most of the public health authorities and almost all traditional physicians are, that they're under the delusional belief that these have been very effective public health interventions, when if you carefully study, and it does take some due diligence, and the material is out there. Fortunately, there's some incredible physicians who've compiled this in the work, and you can actually read through it and find out that it was a big hoax. Most of these vaccines just simply never worked, and there was cover-ups. There's massive cover-ups to this day. So I think the concern here is just not to rely on the conventional public health authorities, that what they're telling you is true, and that to do some independent, objective third-party analysis. And fortunately, thank God, with the internet now, it's pretty easy to do. And we still have the freedom of the press, and there's many books out there that go into some great detail. So before blindly accepting this information, do some independent analysis for yourself, because you ultimately have to make that decision and conclusion
And Joe,
not only for your patients, but for yourself and your
that's
family.
what I was going to say. I mean, we all have to do it for ourselves, but what's the best way to help our patients when they come to us asking us, or even if they don't come to us, can ask us, what do you think is the best way to help?
Well, this is a community effort, so I've been supporting Barbara Loe Fisher, who's sort of like the grandmother of this movement. Started it in 1985, long before I started my website, and had some pretty close relationships in governmental positions to help. And she's a solid voice of reasoning, and so she has a website. It's nvic.org, nvic.org. So I would recommend there. They've got vaccine portal so that you can find people local in your community that you can connect with as these issues come up, as they seek to remove your freedom of choice. And that portal has been very effective in preserving the freedom of many states. And I think we lost California last year, but there was 13 or 14 other states that attempted the same thing, and they were all defeated.
Yes, I
so
know.
NBIC has been very effective. They went at this things with very large volumes of dollars and resources. I mean, they were just absolutely intent to remove the California exemption, which was really one of the best in the country, the philosophical exemption.
And I'm still hopeful, that this subject is going to come back again, and we will be able to defeat it next time. Let me ask you, what is the second one that you mentioned that is impacting most of the society?
Well, the second one is just really, oh my gosh, it's the labeling of GMOs, which has been, I sort of started the movement 4 years ago by making a large donation to the GMO labeling campaign in California, and then subsequently in Washington and Oregon. All of those measures failed, but at least at the ballot box. But what they did is increase the consciousness and awareness, because the average person at the time had no concept or clue what a GMO was. And then we finally were able, not through a direct ballot initiative like those 3 states, but through direct legislative effort, we're able to pass legislation in Vermont. And it was to go into effect, and in fact did go into effect July 1st of this year, and would essentially require mandatory labeling of GMO foods. But then, of course, these guys are very clever. They're penetrated into the government through the revolving door of the industry. And as a result, they were able to pass the DARK Act, DARK being short for Deny Americans the Right to Know. That's, of course, the conventional acronym for it. It has another more formal name, but it passed. Essentially, that override not only the Vermont rule, but any other states that attempt to do this. And but the key thing here, Fab, is that we are focusing on that. This is a good thing. One of the things in life is like be inverse paranoid. So you can be guaranteed bad things are going to happen to you in life. That's a guarantee. You know that. We all know that, right? So when these bad things come your way, we say, well, what's the good thing? Well, the good thing is they've created this, the GMA, the Grocery Manufacturers Association, spent tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to develop this side system called the QR codes, which a person's supposed to look at their smartphone and figure out whether it's GMO or not. But what we've done is we twisted the tables, and we have this massive boycott campaign and process now to tell people, if you see that QR code, it is the mark of Monsanto, the mark of Monsanto. And today is July 23rd as we are recording this. And interestingly, I have a great video from Abby Martin. It's in our lead article today. There's a 30-minute documentary. If someone's not familiar with all the dangers and damages that Monsanto has done, I didn't know until watching her video that they were one of the primary parties responsible for creating the atomic bomb.
Oh my God.
I never knew that. And to me, that makes perfect sense, because they've been in collusion with the government since the 40s. I mean, that we know of. So of course they're going to protect them. There's a large percentage of high-ranking government officials who've gone through the revolving door, who've been on like vice presidents of Monsanto and having really important responsibilities. They switch around, and the government's in just clear collusion with them. So if you haven't if you're not aware of the dangers of Monsanto, I would highly recommend looking that film up. I think I forget that, but if you type in Abby Martin and Monsanto, you come over. Go to my site on July 23rd. You can look up that video.
Well, and of course, if you go to Mercola.com, you can always research. I mean, you can search. It's one of the easiest search engines that you can search just about any topic out there that you're interested in learning more. And that's the way most chiropractors use your site, Joe, is we use it as a way of reference, as a way of education to our patients, as a way of content that we can actually talk to our patients in our newsletters and many other ways. Let's talk a little bit about some tips, though, because I know you've been very much, especially over the last few years, about nutrition. And I know you've been speaking a lot about the importance of not only as chiropractors that we need to feed ourselves the right things and really understand how the body works, but also be able to be knowledgeable enough to help support our patients. Because, I always say that the most effective way to communicate a message is to live your message. So, and you do that so well because you live it every single day. I've seen you work out. We worked out together. I've seen you socially. I mean, you live your message. So what are some tips that you can give us that you've learned, something that you're very excited about, that we as chiropractors need to be aware of and also start paying attention not only for ourselves, but also as a way of helping our patients?
Well, let me give you a few. I mean, obviously go on for 3 or 4 hours on this topic, but the simple basic rule is to eat real food, which is not a rocket science, of course, but the devil's in the details. So the newest information I'm going to be sharing at this event is that there's a massive appreciation of the power of nutritional ketosis. In other words, essentially using a diet that allows your body to burn fat as a primary fuel. Why? Because fat burns much cleaner. The simple reason is fat is a very clean burning fuel. And when you're burning fat primarily, and most people do not burn fat, probably even most people listening to this, certainly 99.9% of the population does not burn fat as their primary fuel, but they're burning sugar. And the reason you don't want to do that is you can live your whole life burning sugar, and most people do, but sugar is a very dirty fuel. Lots of pollutants, whether the pollutants, reactive oxygen species, degrade secondary free radicals, cause mitochondrial DNA damage, mitochondrial cell membranes, nuclear DNA damage. So it's just devastating. So the solution is not to take a lot of antioxidants, but to lower the production of reactive oxygen species by having fat. And the devil's in the details, so it's not an easy thing to do. That's why I mentioned chronometer.com/Mercola as a nutrient tracker to help you do that. There's going to be great videos on there to help walk them through that. But there's another key thing that everyone needs to know. This, for everyone watching this is a key point that I'm going to emphasize. And virtually no physician understands this. Very, very, very few. This is like less understood than vitamin D was when I first started talking about it in the year 2000. So this is the fact that iron is very dangerous for most people watching this. And a conventional physician has no idea what that is. And why? Because there's a reaction that occurs when you burn fuel, whether it's glucose or fat. You're going to, part of that reaction, not all of that oxygen that's combining with it goes towards burning the fuel. Some of it gets transferred over to reactive oxygen species, first superoxide and then peroxide. And when you have peroxide inside the mitochondria and you combine that with high levels of iron, there's this Fenton reaction which causes hydroxyl free radical, which is the most damaging free radical known to man. So the key, and it's a very simple key, is to make sure your iron levels are not too high. And there is an epidemic of progressively increasing iron levels, primarily due to the diet and the fact that we don't normally excrete iron. And it's a simple way to do it. There's no supplement you need to buy or anything. All you need to do is donate your blood. The end result is that almost everyone watching this needs to donate their blood 2 or 3 times a year if you're male. Now, if you're a menstruating woman and you're losing blood regularly, then it's most likely not an issue. It's only a problem for men. Now, you can, of course, get your blood tested, and we strongly recommend that. Just like vitamin D, there's no way you know if you have a high vitamin D level unless you get it tested, or a therapeutic level of vitamin D. But similarly, the test for iron is called ferritin, F-E-R-R-I-T-I-N, can be done by any physician. It's a relatively cheap test, and you could actually do it online if it's like under $40. But most men watching this are about 170 to 200, and there are a number of people watching this are 300, 400, 500. The higher you go, the worse it is. It should be about 60. And there's very few people watching this who have that number, unless you are donating your blood 2 or 3 times a year. So that's the solution. There's no supplement required. There is no doubt in my mind that it could add easily 10, 20, 30 years to your lifespan just by such a simple measure. And so those are things that I want to be sharing on presentation. These are types of things we talk about on the site. But I've been passionate about this for decades. And the more I read, the more I learn, the more I realize the simpler it is. Get sun exposure and make sure your iron level is right, and eat real food. I mean, this is not complex rocket science, but to implement them optimally, there's a lot of simple, effective strategies that you don't have to reinvent the wheel to learn how you can do it easily and effectively.
So Joe, I mean, the last time I went to see you, I remember one of the things that most people don't know is that you feed your employees and you feed them amazing food. And I remember you were teaching me about the importance of fermentation. I don't know if you remember that. And you were teaching me how to get into that. But why don't you give us just, I mean, maybe what you've done in your life of how have you gotten yourself to eat healthier? I mean, what are some of the habits? What are some of the things that someone has taught you or that you have developed yourself that really allows you to eat healthy? Because we live in a world that we get very distracted. We get pulled in every direction. We seem to have a shortage of time no matter who we are and what we do. So what are some 2 or 3 like really good tips that you feel has helped you, not only in your own personal life, but also has helped the millions of people that you support out there?
Well, one is to plan your meals. And that's what the nice thing about do about chronometer, because you could put your meals in before you eat them. So then you'll see if you're in your range as you need to be. But getting back to our employees, we provide them with free lunch pretty much every day because we don't want them to have to go out and get crappy processed junk food. And then we give them fermented foods, as you mentioned, which we make and which gives large amounts of beneficial bacteria, much more than you can buy in a probiotic, and then sprouts, sunflower seed sprouts. And we also, that you don't know this because we've implemented this since you've last been there, but I've come to appreciate the importance of movement. That's why I am not sitting down. I'm standing up and I'm on a rotating board. So to move all day long. So we've got them all stand-up desks. They can stand up or sit down, and their choice, but we give them the opportunity so that they're not sitting down all day, because sitting literally is a highly pernicious activity. And I didn't understand that till literally a few years ago, and I suffered the consequences. I saw dozens of chiropractors for my low back pain without relief because we really weren't addressing the cause, which was me sitting down 14 hours a day or 16 hours, even though I was working out at least an hour pretty much every day, or maybe more, but that doesn't compensate for lack of movement. Movement is completely different than exercise. It's low level, non-exercise activity. It's called, given a name, NET, non-exercise activity, or NEAT, I think it's called. So, but that's a key concept. So just to make sure you are moving. I walked, this morning I walked 3 hours on the beach. So, and the last thing is, yes, we know about vitamin D. Getting your vitamin D levels up is important, no question. And it's really difficult to do if you live in the north in winter. But Fab, the most, I'm coming to a deeper, fuller appreciation. I had an understanding of it before, but now I get it on steroids, is that you've got to be in the light. You need natural light exposure. So that's the ideal way to get your vitamin D. I haven't swallowed vitamin D for 7 years. My vitamin D level is like 90. Because I moved to Florida so I can facilitate that process. I personally am committed to living a healthy lifestyle. There's no way I could do that in Chicago, which is why I don't live there anymore. I live in Florida. I get the sunshine state. So I get sun, and I get to have sunlight exposure in my eyes every day for several hours outside. If I was living down here and didn't go outside, that's reprehensible malpractice, and they should remove my license. Because you've got to implement this. I mean, it's sometimes, even with a perfect diet, if you're not getting natural light, it's not going to work well. There's an amazing, miraculous interaction with those photons from the sun and all those frequencies that doesn't happen indoors. It's like an alien sun. We've got these blue lights that we're looking at all day, and it just causes massive imbalances in your chronobiology. So it's really important basic principle.
Well, Joe, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And listen, if you guys are not inspired by now, I mean, I don't know, you may not be having a pulse right now. I'm so excited because every time I talk to you, Joe, I get recharged, right? I mean, I'm out here every single day trying to promote and share with the public, share with the chiropractic profession, share with other providers, the importance of what we do every day, because I know many of us don't get validated on a regular basis where we feel all pumped up because the world embraces what we do. So we have to do it ourselves. And this empowerment series by FCA really helps us do that. And listen, I want you to right now sign up for an FCA event. Make sure that you come and experience individuals like Joe, and go check out Mercola.com. Believe me, you won't be disappointed. If you're not using it as a resource for yourself and your patients, you're missing out on a tremendous value out there. And Joe, I just want to say personally, thank you, not only for being a good friend, but thank you for being a good friend to chiropractic and to chiropractors all over the world, because you have been supporting us for so many years, especially when other entities out there have not. And I hope that everyone that is listening will really get a chance to meet you and go sign up for an FCA event, shake your hand, give you a hug, make sure that they thank you personally for all the work that you have done, just like I'm doing right now. And for you that is listening, make sure you register right now. Come to an FCA event. I hope you enjoy this FCA Empower Half Hour webinar, and we will definitely see you on the next one. Thank you, Joe.
All right. Thank you, Fab.